Welcome to meeting number 36 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February 4th, 2021, the committee is resuming its study on the environmental contribution of agriculture. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photo of your screen is not permitted. Pour garantir le bon déroulement de la réunion, j'aimerais vous faire part.
In order to ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to share a couple of rules with you. Before speaking, please wait for me to recognize you. If you are here by video conference, use the microphone and take yourself off mute. Those in the room will, of course, be observing all the rules required for people in person. And please, all observations and comments must go through me, the chair. When you are not speaking, please stay on mute.
Our witness for today's meeting for the first panel, we have from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Mr. Warren Goodlett, Director General, Research and Analyst, Directorate, Strategy Policy Branch. Welcome, Mr. Goodlett. Also, we have Matt Perry, Director General, Policy Development and Analyst, Directorate, Strategic Policy Branch. Welcome, Mr. Perry. Mr. Marco Valencienti, Director General, Innovation Program Directorate. Welcome, Mr. Valencienti. Dr. Javier Garcia Garza, Special Advisor, Agriculture and Climate Change. Welcome, Mr. Garcia Garza, to our committee. And also now from the Department of Environment, we have Mr. John Moffat, Assistant Deputy Minister, Environmental Protection Branch. Welcome, Mr. Moffat. And Tara Shannon, Assistant Deputy Minister, Canadian Wildlife Service. So welcome to all of you people, and we'll have opening statements, 7.5 minutes by the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food. And if you want to start, whoever wants to lead for 7.5 minutes, go ahead.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, I'm Matt Perry. I'm the Director General of the Policy Development Analysis Directorate at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. It is a pleasure to see you all again. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the agriculture sector's contribution as it relates to the environment. So over the last 20 years, Canada's agriculture sector has taken important steps to reduce its environmental impacts. Efforts to date have improved production efficiency and carbon sequestration, allowing the sector to increase productivity without significant increases in emissions. Since 2005, total greenhouse gas emissions from Canada's agriculture sector have been relatively stable. According to Canada's National Inventory Report for 2021, greenhouse gas emissions for this sector were roughly 73 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2019, compared to 72 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2005. However, total emissions are only part of the picture. Over the past 2 decades, agricultural soils have become an important source of carbon sequestration, removing as much as 11 million tons in 2005. Malgré ces progrès, des mesures supplémentaires.
Notwithstanding this progress, further action is needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to continue to sequester carbon in agricultural lands and soils. As highlighted in the speech from the throne, climate action is a cornerstone of the government's plan to support and create 1 million jobs across the country. And farmers and ranchers are key partners in the fight against climate change. Supporting their efforts to reduce emissions and build resilience is a key priority of the government. Canada's agriculture sector holds the potential to play an important role in reducing Canada's net greenhouse gas emissions while achieving environmental, social, and economic co-benefits. To this end, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is working with the provinces and territories, farmers, and other Canadian agriculture and food stakeholders to develop and implement innovative solutions that protect the environment while supporting farmers and growing the economy. Under the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, up to $438 million in FPT cost-shared funding is available to farmers for the adoption of beneficial management practices that protect and build resilience in soil, in water, in the air, as well as support biodiversity, enhance resilience, and mitigate the impacts of climate change. This funding also helps to build producer awareness of environmental risks through the use of environmental farm plans. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada also has a long history of conducting research on practices and technologies to reduce agriculture's impact on the environment and transferring this knowledge to producers. This work involves identifying innovative practices that can protect soils from erosion and increase soil carbon, identifying risks to water quality, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and improving biodiversity on agricultural lands. This work has contributed to improvements in the quality, yield, safety, and sustainability of the food produced by Canadian farmers.
Have been announced over the last 6 months in Canada's Strengthened Climate Plan and in Budget 2021 to expand collaboration with farmers and ranchers and to accelerate progress in the fight against climate change. First, the government is investing $165.7 million over 7 years in an enhanced agricultural clean technology program to support the industry in developing and adopting transformative clean technologies. Budget 2021 committed $50 million of this program towards supporting farmers in purchasing more efficient grain dryers and $10 million towards powering farms with clean energy and moving away from diesel fuel. The balance of the funding under this program will support investments in sustainable technologies aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Secondly, in March of this year, the government announced a $185 million agricultural climate solutions program. This program will support the development and on-farm implementation of farming practices to tackle climate change through increased carbon sequestration and lower emissions. Projects implemented through this program will also contribute to other environmental co-benefits, such as protecting fresh water and biodiversity resources. For example, practices such as the use of shelter belts or cover crops can store carbon in soils and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The program aims to establish a Canada-wide network of regional collaboration hubs made up of producers, scientists, and other stakeholders that we call living laboratories. Thirdly, in addition to the $185 million previously announced for the Agricultural Climate Solutions Program, Budget 2021 provided an additional $200 million over 2 years to support on-farm climate action to reduce emissions through improved nitrogen management, increased adoption of cover cropping, and normalizing rotational grazing. Work is currently underway to develop and launch this program as soon as possible. Finally, the government is consulting the sector in relation to the announced target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from fertilizer application to 30% below 2020 levels by 2030. The department also continues to collaborate with Environment and Climate Change Canada and other partners on initiatives to enhance environmental sustainability, including, for example, through the creation of a Canada Water Agency to keep Canada's water safe, clean, and well managed. The department is also developing an agriculture sector species at-risk action plan as part of the pan-Canadian approach to transforming species at-risk conservation in Canada that aims to identify and prioritize opportunities for the sector to align with positive outcomes for species at risk and biodiversity conservation. In closing, I would like to reiterate that the agriculture sector has a critical role in the fight against climate change and the transition to a clean economy. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is working to support farmers in this goal to ensure that the sector's environmental impact continues to shrink while its economic output continues to grow. Thank you for your time, and my colleagues and I would be pleased to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Just before we move on, Madam Clerk, I think there was still an issue with my mic. We did a change. Everything's good on the sound? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you. So from the Department of Environment, 7.5 minutes for opening statements. Whoever wants to take it on.
That'll be me, Mr. Chair. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Moffat. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Environmental Protection Branch, the environmental, which is the regulatory branch for environmental protection measures. And I'm here this afternoon with my colleague Tara Shannon, who's my counterpart on the as the ADM of the Canadian Wildlife Service. As Mr. Perry explained, Canadian farms have an important role to play in reducing greenhouse gas emissions through the implementation of conservation activities or in adopting, sorry, I've just, my documents just disappeared. I'll be right with you. There we go. My apologies. Through the implementation of conservation activities or adopting new management practices or technologies. I'm going to discuss one additional way in which Environment and Climate Change Canada is creating incentives for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and that is through the development of greenhouse gas offsets. As we indicated in our Strengthened Climate Plan that was published in December, the government is developing a federal greenhouse gas offset system. This system will encourage cost-effective reductions of greenhouse gas emissions from activities that are not covered by the federal carbon pollution pricing system, including many potential activities in the agricultural sector. Offsets can provide a financial incentive for an activity in the form of a credit that can be sold to offset an equivalent amount of greenhouse gas emissions from another source. We published draft regulations to establish the offset system in March, a couple of months ago, and we aim to publish the final regulations this fall. In addition to being used in order to, as a form of compliance under the federal pricing system, we expect that there will be additional demand for federal offset systems from other sources, including, for example, in helping companies reach carbon neutral or net zero commitments, of which we are seeing an increasing number. The federal offset system will, because offset credits substitute for a reduction in a regulated sector, we need to establish rules to ensure that offset projects achieve real, additional, verified, and quantified and permanent reductions of greenhouse gases. This means that in order for any conservation activity or land management practice to generate credits, it must be essentially above and beyond business as usual practices. So it can't be for something that is already required by law. It can't be for something that is covered by carbon pricing, and it can't be for something that is a business as usual practice. In order for a project to generate offset credits, the way we determine that a project is eligible is to ensure that it follows an approved offset protocol. These protocols set out a consistent approach for quantifying emission reductions and removals for eligible activities. By going above and beyond business as usual practices on their farms, agricultural land managers will not only benefit from the opportunity to generate offset credits, but they will also benefit from enhancements in soil health and productivity. The specific farming practices that will be able to generate offset credits will be established through the protocol development process. In other words, the activities that will be eligible to generate credits will depend on activities for which we have developed protocols. We've started to work on the first set of protocols, and among the first 4 is a protocol to support enhanced soil organic carbon. This protocol will create opportunities for farmers to generate offset credits through the adoption of sustainable agricultural land management practices that increase soil organic carbon levels. As you would expect, this protocol is complex and requires further research and consultation with stakeholders. We've engaged an expert committee to advise us, and we expect to develop the protocol at some point in 2022. We are also looking at other possible offset protocols relevant to the agricultural sector. These include activities such as livestock feed management, avoided conversion of grasslands, reduced nitrogen oxide emissions from fertilizers, anaerobic digestion, and livestock manure management. So that's a quick overview of our federal greenhouse gas offset system and the way in which it might create opportunities for the agricultural sector. I would be happy to answer any further questions you have about this initiative, and my colleague will be happy to describe some of the activities that are underway related to our activities in support of wildlife and biodiversity protection. Thank you, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Moffat. And so now we'll go to the question round. The first panel we have for 6 minutes, Ms. Rood. You have 6 minutes. Go ahead, Ms. Rood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses appearing today. Mr. Moffat, when you were just talking there recently, you were saying that when you set protocols, you consult with stakeholders. Just wondering, is that with actual farmers, or do you go out onto the farm, and have you been on a farm to see what farmers do right now?
Yes, so, well, have I been on a farm? Not recently, but I'm not the one doing the work. So we undertook, initially undertook a survey to identify activities that should be the highest priority for us in terms of developing protocols. That was.
So is it consulting with farmers? Sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to know, is it with farmers, or who do you mean by stakeholders?
Yes, so with farmers, with agricultural academics, with representatives from all of the major agricultural industry associations. And of course, it's important particularly important in the context of agriculture, to ensure that we have input from across the country, because agricultural practices and requirements vary significantly from province to province.
Thank you very much. The Western Canadian wheat growers have calculated that agriculture sector captures 100 megatons of carbon dioxide in the grain they grow, which amounts to about 30 megatons more than what the national inventory reports as to GHGs emitted by the agricultural sector. And the wheat growers have argued that when grain leaves the farm gate, they are net zero for GHGs. And I would argue that they are a net carbon sink for 33 megatons of greenhouse gases, and that's from their report. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on the wheat growers' calculations, and also comment on giving credit to grain growers and the agricultural sector for constituting a net carbon sink.
So I won't comment on the inventory itself, and I'm wondering if my colleagues at Agriculture and Agri-Foods might comment on that. I will comment on the credit issue. The global obligation that we face is to reduce emissions. So nobody's getting a credit for something that they're already doing. We have to do more. And so the goal of our offset system is to give credits for doing something new and additional over and above what we're already doing.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to comment on that, or?
Well, thank you for the question. I might turn to my colleague, Dr. Garcia Garza, to see if he has any comments regarding the National Inventory Report?
Not necessarily about the National Inventory Report, but just an observation that although during the period where the plant is capturing the carbon for the production of the seed and the grain, as soon as the grain is used for feed, for food, etc., that carbon is released. So it's not something that is actually stored there. So it's not like, for example, a tree that is not caught and burnt or used, etc., where this carbon stays there. So that carbon gets recycled as soon as we actually use so it's released again into the atmosphere when we use it for food, etc.
Thank you very much for that. Going back to that report, the latest National Inventory Report on greenhouse gas sources and sinks in Canada, it was submitted to the United Nations in April 2021. And I believe I noticed, first of all, that the report indicates that GHG emissions by the agriculture sector as a whole were reported as down by 0.83 megatons or 1.4%. And I've also noticed that the GHG emissions from energy used in agriculture stood at 3.7 megatons for 2019. So these are well below most other sectors, including residential housing, for example, with GHG emissions of 42 megatons. So given how little GHGs are emitted from agricultural energy use, do you not think that the government of Canada should extend the carbon tax exemption already available for agricultural use of gasoline and fuel oils to include propane and natural gas? And if not, why?
With respect, that's not a question for officials. That's a question that you need to address to the members of the government.
All right, I'll ask my next question, but I noticed in the report also in the section on land use and land use change in forestry that in 2019, cropland was a net carbon sink at 4.2 megatons of GHG sequestered. And in the same section, I noticed that grassland is reported as a net GHG emitter at greater than 0.5 megatons emitted. And again, the same section, I noticed that wetlands are reported as net emitters of GHGs at 2.6 megatons. So are you able to explain these calculations, or at least a top level explanations of how these calculations would be made?
Quick answer, please.
Yeah, the short answer is through data collection and modeling associated with changes in the landscape. So if we lose wetlands, then we lose the sequestration that previously occurred. If we gain wetlands, then we gain sequestration that occurred. So again, it's always relative to what occurred in the past. So what changes are occurring on the land or in industrial or agricultural practices.
Thank you, Mr. Moffat. Thank you, Ms. Rood. And now, Monsieur Drouin pour 6 minutes. Allez-y, Monsieur Drouin.
6 minutes, Mr. Drouin.
To take the time and come before our committee. I've got a question with regards to identifying carbon emissions on farm and whether or not we plan on moving forward, or we've identified some organizations that can help our farmers identify how to best reduce those emissions. So I can think of, for instance, should I increase my carbon emissions in the barn, or should I increase my carbon emissions in the field? And we all know that can't be done at the same time. So I know New Zealand has a plan, and I'm sure you're already aware to have sort of these farm consultants to reduce carbon emissions on farms. I'm just, perhaps Ag Canada could help me with this, and maybe I can flip it over to environment if you have some comments on that.
Thank you very much for the question. I'll perhaps make a few comments and then see if my colleagues would like to add to this. But it's very much an important part of the new programs that have been that were announced in the Strength and Climate Plan and Budget 2021 to look at ways to work directly with farmers through both the Living Laboratories program that I mentioned in my opening remarks, as well as through on-farm action through the top up, the 200 million additional funding that was announced in Budget 2021. And as part of that, officials are certainly looking at options to where there are opportunities to work with other groups and experts in the field to support the adoption of climate smart farming practices. I'll perhaps see if Mr. Valententi or Dr. Garcia Garza have anything they'd like to add to that.
I would just thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question, and just to follow up on my colleague Matt Perry's comment. Yes, I think absolutely one of the elements we are looking at and engaging with stakeholders, industry associations, as well as other stakeholders on the on-farm side, is to look at those agronomic practices and whether there's opportunities to share best practices. I'll call it, knowledge transfer, for example. From various from looking at it from various perspectives, whether we're thinking cover cropping or whether thinking nutrient management, there are opportunities to build some of those practices, including best management practices, in the context of the Living Labs, which is collaboration between farmers, academia, to look at those practices and use those BMPs to transfer the knowledge through training, through agronomic services, et cetera. So yes, we are looking at those elements as part of our package, our programming package suite.
Great, thank you for the response. And all of us on this committee have heard with regards to grain drying and the price on pollution. And I know there's a fund that's been announced through Budget 2021. I'm wondering, I know the program hasn't been, is not up and running yet, but just wondering in terms of the objectives, are we going to identify how much carbon we want to reduce through this particular program? Are we going to identify the type of grain dryers that we will prefer? Obviously, if we're looking at efficient grain dryers, then I would say we know that the price on pollution is going to rise to 170. So obviously we wouldn't, I would think that we would favor technologies that wouldn't necessarily use heavy carbon technologies. Just can you give us some insight or stay tuned for some news?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. I will say in the context of the Agriculture Clean Tech Program, details haven't been announced yet, will be done shortly. We are looking at both an on-farm element as well as a research component. And to the comment or to the question about technology, we know that there are different types of technology currently in the market, but we also know that there are prototypes and there are other elements that are coming into play. We're seeing it even with some Canadian companies that are looking at different types of technologies. For example, biomass is one that is really going to be pushing the limits, but who knows? The fund will be for a longer period of time, up to 7 years. And so we're hoping that we continue to look at new technologies over that time span. We are looking, as I said, on the biomass. That is one of the newer technologies on the market, and we're hoping that we continue to see evolution of the grain drying technologies over the coming years.
Great, thank you. And the other part of the Budget 21, we announced some dollars that would go towards helping farmers make some of that land more profitable. So keeping wetlands, keeping forestry on land. And I think we mentioned using a reverse auction. Have we started to think what that will look like shortly in terms of the objectives of that particular program?
Quick answer, please.
Is there such a thing?
So it's Tara Shen from the Canadian Wildlife Service. I think the question on the reverse auction would be for me. The short answer is the work is still ongoing, so details need to still be worked out. And as with any of the programs described, we're going to need to work with stakeholders to define that.
Thank you, Ms. Shannon. Maintenant, Monsieur Perron pour 6 minutes. Allez-y.
Mr. Perron, 6 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, and thank you to the witnesses for having taken time to join us here today. It's highly appreciated. Ms. Shannon, I would like to give you a chance to say a bit more about what you have just said. You only had a couple of seconds to give your response. I'd like to hear a longer one.
Merci.
Very well. Thank you so much for the question.
Not too much more for me to add, except I would note the budget did identify up to $60 million to support a number of initiatives on farms and agricultural lands, including a reverse auction. So a reverse auction, a way for Government of Canada to support farmers who wish to set aside lands for wetland and habitat conservation, amongst others, or grassland redevelopment. And so details do need to be worked out. We're budget just announced, and we're pleased, but we have to continue with some work to define that.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Balasanti, let me go back to what you said last. You mentioned knowledge sharing between university specialists and agricultural developers and farmers. So where are we on research for new technology right now? You mentioned grain dryers. I'd like you to tell us a bit more about what's going on budget and financing wise, because we've heard people from the universities say that their research projects were underfunded. Have you thought of that? And when it comes to new technology, for example, the grain dryers, would 50 million, it might not seem like a lot. We have had witnesses before us mention that the alternatives at present are really not viable, economically speaking. They're too expensive. So that's where 50 million might actually make a difference. So could you tell us more about that?
Thank you very much, Chair. So I would just make two comments on the grain drying. Again, just a reminder that in budget 2021, as part of the $165 million agriculture clean tech program, 50 million was carved out for this, as well as 10 million for fuel switching, which was another component that was deemed to be part of the 165. We are pretty active with both Canadian companies, with Canadian companies as well, to look at those new technologies. This is a fund that will be over a number of years, 7 years, and we know that there is a need now, and we are looking at new technologies, as I mentioned, biomass, but it does allow for companies to think about building some of those newer prototypes whereby we can fund the research and the innovation component of green efficiency or grain drying or barn heating as well. So the program will allow both immediate as well as thinking about new prototypes in this area. And with regards to academia, I just wanted to mention again on the agriculture climate solutions, it's $185 million 10-year program, the Living Labs component. Within these groups of individuals, we will have producers, we will have academia, NGOs as well, developing within their landscape, within their project proposal, new BMPs that will support more efficiency in the greenhouse gas reduction components, and so that's going to be an element where academia will play a part as part of that.
Very good, thank you. About the 50 million that you've brought up, the 50 million over 7 years, given that this is an area that doesn't necessarily make money, are these amounts that could be added to? Is that something that's being thought of? Or are we just starting where we are and eventually more political decisions might play in? 30 seconds.
Mr. Chair, for the question. Unfortunately, that is not a question for officials in the context of the level. We have 50 million, and I think we're going to play with that money for sure.
Very well. Thank you very, very much. I would like to speak to Mr. Moffat. Mr. Moffat, you have mentioned, and we'll do this quickly, and at worst I'll get back to you in the second round. You mentioned the need to go above business as usual, not taking into account what was actually being done. We have heard from witnesses before us about farms that have been organic for over 20 years. These are pioneers who have developed specific practices. Have you foreseen a way to integrate these farmers into your offset-based pricing system to recognize what they are already doing? Even if it's not new, it seems to be very positive and very helpful for the environment. So it's difficult not to give them some recognition and then to take a producer who's really polluting just to get them to pollute a little less and then reward them. Well, that really is a very good question. And it's a big challenge for us.
It is, however, that what we need to do is focus on creating incentives for changed behavior so that we increase sequestration or reduce emissions relative to current levels. So there are some practices where there are some cutting edge farmers who are experimenting with doing things differently. To the extent that we can identify those activities and develop a standardized approach to measuring the impacts of those activities, if other farmers or if those farmers and other farmers undertake those activities, they would be considered beyond business as usual and could be eligible for an offset. The challenge for us comes in determining when an activity that once was new is now close to business as usual.
Thank you,
and that's the challenge that we have in determining exactly what qualifies for an offset.
Thank you, Mr. Moffat. Merci, Monsieur Perron. Maintenant, 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our departmental witnesses for engaging with us on this study. I'm not sure if Mr. Perry or Mr. Moffat will be best suited to answer a question regarding the soil organic carbon change indicator. It is on AAFC's website, and the last data that we have is 10 years old. So I wanted to know about the progress being made on that, and just about some of the methodology that you're using, because, you know, if we want to know where we're going, we have to know where we're at currently. And so, you know, I kind of wanted some sense, and I know Canada is a very regional country. Our agricultural soils are very different depending on what region you're in. But is there a sense of, you know, just how much carbon our soils can absorb on a per hectare basis on different regions? I mean, is there a maximum amount? How much carbon generally do you think our soils are capable of taking out of the atmosphere through these beneficial farming practices?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. A very good question. I will turn to Javier, I believe, from our Science and Technology branch to respond to this one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So indeed, the information that is actually right now available, as you pointed out, is available from data that was collected in the census back from 2011. We are in the process. This census is done every 5 years. So we are in the process of updating that with the information up to 2016. That said, we do have information, and it's a system that records that between the census and something internally with the modeling that we do for each of the different practices, the crops, etc., that are developed throughout the country. That so the figures will be updated soon. And we are working to actually change this scheduling to be more frequently reporting on the soil carbon that is in our soils. The methodologies that we actually follow, methodologies that are pretty much standardized around the world, the kind of things that we use, and using the kinds of models or systems that are approved through international standards. Now, your last question about the diversity of actually different soils that we have in the country, the different geographic sort of conditions. So we have different sort of coefficients and models for each of the different areas. We are in the process of actually establishing, or through some of that activity, the differences of what different soils in different regions of the country are capable of storing. That being said, the carbon cycle is a very dynamic system, and there is something that what is possible biologically is something that needs, I would say, continuity in maintaining practices. So it is not something of very, what I can define as very stable thing, but it's a dynamic system. I'll stop here.
Understood. Thank you so much. Mr. Perry, in an earlier meeting last month, one of our witnesses was Danone, a big multinational company, and they are investing actually a considerable sum of their own funding into regenerative agriculture. They have received feedback from the farmers involved who have reported lower input costs, better yield, overall soil health. So, there is an accumulating body of evidence out there showing that this is not only going to be good for our environment, but it's also going to benefit our farmers' bottom line. Is there any kind of data similar to what Danone is engaging in that AAFC is also using to help develop some of these programs? I mean, I know farmers know a lot of this already, but there's always room for improvement in any kind of a system you're operating in, and that knowledge transfer, I think, is a really important part of it. Anything you can contribute on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I mean, I think my answer would be a fairly general one, in the sense that the government has made it very clear that it intends to work closely with farm groups and producer organizations, the food industry and other stakeholders to very much explore these opportunities and look for ways to address environmental issues such as climate change, while at the same time expanding and growing businesses. Would make the point of, there's been several references to the Living Labs work, which is intended to bring together different perspectives and really look at those projects or activities that can really provide a sort of a win-win-win scenario. So maybe I'll just check if any of my colleagues want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, maybe Matt. Oh, sorry, Evan. I was just going to add briefly that as part of the Living Labs, there's also looking at the socioeconomic factors of it, so the economic barriers and benefits that the farmers see. So there is a bottom line economic aspect to that work, as well as the scientific angle to the Living Labs. So there's sort of both sides being looked at there.
Thank you, Mr. Goodlett. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Now we'll go to the second round, and we'll 5 minutes for Mr. Epp. You have the floor, Mr. Epp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you to the departmental witnesses for joining us today. I'd like to begin with some basics. AG's fairly positive environmental records 2005, particularly with greenhouse gases. It's come from many, many different things, but one of those things is a basic toolkit called the 4 Rs. I'd like to begin with AAFC. For the record, so it's not me or one of my colleagues reading it in for the report. Can you talk about the 4 Rs, define them, and just talk about your view of them?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The 4R process refers to a set of practices and activities that I believe has been developed by Fertilizer Canada, and that are very much about practices that farmers can undertake to improve in the application of fertilizer. I think I'll turn to one of my colleagues, who may be able to speak with a little more detail on the particular, the 4 elements that were noted. Dr. Garcia-Garza?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So very quickly, the 4 R's stand for the right rate, the right time, the right placement, and the right type of fertilizer. So I think it is a set of different practices that is attempting to use the most efficient possible way the fertilizers, the inorganic fertilizers. So I think independently, each of these different points, rates, etc., is something that scientifically academics, our own scientists within Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, is research that has been going for many years and is now packaged by, as my colleague said, Fertilizers Canada, to actually advance it as a package, that they are actually a group of different principles that farmers should be applying in order to make a good use of fertilizers.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Perry. You talked about the different programs targeted at environmental initiatives. What percentage of AAFC's budget is directed toward environmental initiatives and support? Just as a rough ballpark.
Unfortunately, I'd have to follow up on that. It is, it is part of the existing Canadian Agricultural Partnership. So there's both funding that is cost shared with the provinces and territories, as well as specific programs that are.
Maybe then, if you can, just submit that in writing so I don't lose more time. Thank you.
Sure.
It was mentioned earlier, biomass as a particular option as alternatives to fossil fuels for grain drying and possibly other barn heating and other sources. I'm going to need some help here. By the time we gather biomass, by the time at times we might have to dry it, by the time we store it, and then when we burn it and re-release the greenhouse gases, what is the promise in this technology for replacing, particularly for greenhouse gas emissions, for replacing, let's take specifically natural gas and propane for grain drying? I think Mr. Valencetti, I think you spoke of the biomass and the research there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert on the biomass, but I can say that is one of the elements that we're looking at. There are actually Canadian companies that are fully engaged in using biomass as the clean fuel, used like if we're thinking of wood pellets and we're thinking of oat pellets in the use of grain drying. And so I'm not an expert on kind of the technology behind it, but it is one of the promising areas of focus in the context of grain drying vis-a-vis the traditional grain dryers that we see on the market currently. And as I said, there are Canadian companies that are very, very active in this place and will be supporting producers on new technologies in the grain drying.
Thank you. I'd like to switch to the Department of the Environment, please, to Mr. Moffat. Our briefing note from the Library of Parliament talks about the nitrogen and phosphorus balances for agriculture, and actually it's a fairly good news story. They're improvement over time, and particularly when we're compared to our fellow OECD members. You mentioned earlier that with respect to our environmental targets, we can't go back. We're not going to give credit for back. We need to move forward. So can you put, particularly in the case of phosphorus, agriculture's phosphorus loading compared to, let's say, what we hear about municipal sewage discharges, are those also improving? What is agriculture's share to this, problem that we need to focus on and improve upon compared to other areas?
Very quick answer, please.
So short answer, twofold. First, I'll have to get back to you with the precise data. We do have that data. Second, that the data will show that the relative contribution, of course, varies from area to area and ecosystem to ecosystem. So we have some ecosystems that are significantly impacted continue to be significantly impacted by agriculture.
Thank you.
Whereas others, it's primarily an industrial and municipal effluent issue.
Thank you, Mr. Moffat. Thank you, Mr. Epp. And now Mr. Blois for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Blois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Moffat, I'll start with you. Around offset protocols, I understand, and you certainly teased this out in some of your earlier answers, we're trying to reward behavior that was not necessarily already being undertaken, to be able to continue to reduce emissions. But do you have a sense as it relates to the offset protocols for soil, what year we're going to start calculating to, what baseline are we working from in terms of rewarding those that are using different techniques? Mr. Moffat?
Yeah, sorry. So I think that we're looking at activities. We will not be giving credits for anything that occurred before 2018. But so that's in terms of the activity. And then in terms of defining what constitutes a beyond business as usual, that is something that will vary depending on the activity.
And so, and I appreciate that. That's helpful. So there's not necessarily going to be one benchmark. Like if we're talking about no-till in agriculture, for example, business as usual would be a certain threshold. Like once industry hits this, it would be deemed that it's business as usual. Is that my understanding?
That's exactly right.
And has there been any, I apologize because there's a lot going on in the federal government. As a member of parliament, I haven't got into the depths of the Canadian Gazette. Have we actually, as it relates to offset protocols for soil, have we set what that benchmark is, or is that still to be determined?
So that's still to be determined on a protocol by protocol basis. We have draft regulations which set the basic rules for developing the protocols and then using the credits. We're now in the process of developing those protocols. And as I said, one of the first 4 that we're working on involves organic soil carbon.
Okay, so as I understand, there's not actually something that's set that says, okay, once an industry hits X amount of percentage of using these certain types of procedures, it's not, or it hits business as usual. That's not actually been publicized yet. It's an ongoing conversation.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. This might be out of your realm of expertise, Mr. Moffat, but I'll ask it anyways, because I think there's a lot of opportunities here. My colleagues have talked about the things that are going on in agriculture. We're certainly talking about things that we can do to continue to advance, to work with industry. We've pointed to things, investments in the budget that's going to help that. Is there conversations being had, at the ministerial level or certainly within department internationally about ways that we can try to get to a standard price on pollution or these mechanisms? Because obviously, if Canada adopts a certain approach, but other jurisdictions are choosing not to ask their domestic producers to be part of the climate solutions, it could create an imbalance in trade. Are those conversations that are being had, or is that outside the scope of what you work on in the department?
No, that's directly within the scope of what we work on, because of course this is a challenge for Canada and other countries that are taking action to reduce greenhouse gases. We need to do so in a way that both reduces emissions, but that actually doesn't adversely impact our economic activity, and that certainly doesn't simply lead to transferring that activity to another jurisdiction with less stringent standards. So sure. There's a number of ways to do that. One is in the way we design pricing. I can get into that. Another
Moffat,
is in the way.
Sorry, I don't mean.
So we
are
looking at. We are looking at it.
I only have too much time, and this could be a long one. I would be interested, to the extent that you could share with the committee some of the work that's going on to try to find that harmonization. I would just be interested as a member of parliament knowing that, if it's possible. So I'll leave that with you. I have about 55 seconds left in my time. As it relates to the clean fuel standard, these are opportunities that exist for our sector. Mr. Valensantini talked about wood pellets, for example. I guess I'll go quickly to Mr. Valensantini. As it relates to using wood pellets for grain drying, is the idea that it would be an end-use fuel switch, or we're actually using wood pellets to kind of blend into the type of fuels that are already being used?
It's to use that as a fuel for the grain drying as part of the new biomass technology. So again, there's different elements, different types, but that's the intent.
And just, I have 10 seconds. So Mr. Chair, if you'll permit me. So then, as I understand it, this would be an end-use fuel switch on a stationary application then to be able to try to help support reduce emissions, but still have the activity continue.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blois. Thank you, Mr. Barancini. Et maintenant, Monsieur Perron, 2 minutes et demie. Allez-y, Monsieur Perron.
Mr. Perron, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pick up with Mr. Moffat where we left off earlier. You recognized that it is a challenge to be able to recognize proper environmental practices adopted in the past. Then with your colleagues, you've mentioned no-till cultivation, practices that can be encouraged. But if someone has been doing this for 5 years and they wind up, empty-handed, I don't think this is a very good way to proceed. Isn't there any way whatsoever to set, let's say, an average for production by area tilled, greenhouse gases, and so on? I don't have, any scientific background, and I'm not a policymaker, but look, we're chatting about it. Some sort of average. So people who would do better than the average might get some offset credits. That might be a very good incentive. And lead others to fall in with the pioneers rather than simply penalize pioneers and sort of leave them gaping while others take the money.
Described as one that we use where we regulate a sector and they have to achieve a certain standard, and then we can, in doing that, we can reward companies or farmers for doing better than average. An offset is something you're not required to do. So the challenge we have with offsets is that there's no regulated requirement. So we're giving somebody an economic benefit. And as a matter of policy, the government has decided, consistent with basic international practice on offsets, that offsets should only recognize changed behavior going forward and not be a reward for early action.
All right. Okay, I would just suggest that be thought through perhaps a bit more, but I'm not going to spend more time on it. When it comes to supporting innovation now, giving businesses some play there, do you have a way of seeing how producers might be encouraged to use sums when they're ready for it and recognize innovation? For example, we have a witness who told us about a bio device that could replace some other types of fertilizer, for example.
The Agriculture Clean Tech program, we are looking at both an on-farm adoption, but also an innovation component. So yes, and I should say, part of the dollars will also be used for agri-food processing. So there is an opportunity to get and use those dollars to support increased innovation technologies with regards to some of our environmental goals. So yes, there's those both components are going to be part of the Agriculture Clean Tech program.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. All well, Mr. Perron? Yes, unless you tell me I have more time, because you said 2.5 minutes, and I think I've been at it for at least that long. Whoops, perhaps there was an error. I'm so sorry. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Perron. But if you give me a little more time, I'm happy to take it. You know me well. Next round for sure. Thanks, Mr. Perron.
McGregor, sorry, Mr. McGregor, 2.5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my next question will go to AAFC. Our first report as a committee was, of course, into the suite of business risk management programs. And of course, we all know that farmers face a multitude of risks, price volatility, changing international relationships, but also increasingly climate change. And of course, your own website details the risks associated with a changing climate. There certainly are a few opportunities, but also a whole boatload of risks. I wanted to know, I guess it's a two-part question. First of all, has AAFC looked at what the projected expenditures will be for the suite of business risk management programs in the context of a changing climate? Like, do we have an analysis of what our expenditures might end up being in terms of tax dollars? And is there any kind of a movement afoot to look at whether sound management practices are going to be including anything related to farmers adopting climate change adaptation measures?
Thank you for the question. I'll take a start at a response, but again, I'll look to my colleagues to supplement if they wish. So I would note that there are regular assessments of the environmental impact of the Canadian Agricultural Partnerships business risk management programs that take these periodic assessments take place every 5 years, I believe. And since the coming into force of the Farm Income Protection Act, there have been 7 environmental impact assessments conducted. And so, there is a periodic review of these programs and how they operate and how they reflect the conditions. I can't speak specifically to the costs in the question that was posed, but I would note that there is a regular discussion, and obviously there are also ongoing discussions with the provinces and territories about the functioning of these programs. So I'll just check if any of my colleagues wanted to add to that.
Yeah, a quick answer if you want to reply, but if not.
No, okay. I think we're
okay. Well, thank you, and I know we're out of time, but I just curious. So, say as I think Mr. Valenti said, carbon in the soil is very it's not static, so it can be released at any time doing different practice. How are we going to regulate, say, another person owns the farm and starts doing plowing instead of direct seeding and stuff like that? Is there going to be regulations, or how would you regulate that? Just curious if anyone wants to answer. Maybe there's no. Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. So I want to thank the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Mr. Goodlett, Mr. Perry, Mr. Valancini, and also Dr. Garcia Garza, and also Department of Environment, John Moffat and Tara Shannon. Thank you all for this very interesting conversation. And with that, we'll suspend and go to our next panel. So we'll be back soon. So we'll suspend the meeting for now. Thank you all. Canada, Monsieur Pierre Lampron, qu'on attend toujours, et Monsieur
Mr. Pierre Lampron, President, whom we're waiting for.
International Milk Day. The timing is good to have you on our committee. Also from the National Farmers Union, we have Mr. Darren Qualman, Directeur de la Politique de l'Action.
Director of Climate Policy and Action.
Mr. Qualman. And if you want to start, Mr. Qualman, for 7 minutes, 7.5 minutes for your opening statement, you have the floor now.
Thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes, it's coming good on my end.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm pleased to appear before you today. When I received your invitation, I was very happy to see that you wanted to investigate ways to reduce agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, promote soil health, reduce the agriculture sector's dependence on fossil fuels, and encourage farmers to adopt environmentally friendly practices. These are precisely the right questions and the right aims. Thank you for pursuing this work. In the 7 minutes I have left, I will share with you 7 points that can contribute to the foundations of your work. First, your work is important, timely, and will build upon and most importantly advance work underway in parallel. Work to develop on-farm measures and government policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is advancing, but can benefit from your support and assistance. I'll mention 3 pieces of work underway as examples. In 2019, the National Farmers Union produced the report Tackling the Farm Crisis and the Climate Crisis. That report contains a detailed plan to reduce agricultural emissions by 30% by the mid-2030s, to improve soils and to provide other environmental co-benefits. In 2020, more than a dozen organizations came together to form Farmers for Climate Solutions. The Farmer for Climate Solutions Task Force has provided recommendations to the Government of Canada, and some of those recommended programs were included in Budget 2021. Thank you for that. And in 2021, the NFU published its report, Imagine If, a vision of a near zero emission farm and food system for Canada. That very positive and very readable report provides details on how farmers and policymakers can cooperate to achieve ambitious and rapid emissions reductions in the coming decades. Your study will build upon work already underway. I mentioned the NFU's report so that you might have a sense of some of the research and resources available that we are happy to share. My second point, in terms of reducing agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, the most important thing you can know is this: agriculture does not produce greenhouse gas emissions. Agricultural inputs produce greenhouse gas emissions. We know this for sure because we have 10,000 years of data. For 10,000 years, farmers farmed and they did not affect the atmosphere or the climate. That remained true until the early 20th century. Then, as farmers adopted a growing array of farm inputs, emissions soared. Thus, it follows inescapably that any low emission farm or food system will be a low input system. My third point, measures to reduce emissions can increase net farm income. Farmers' margins have decreased steeply. Another way of putting this is that for every dollar that farmers earn, a larger and larger share goes to pay for inputs. Farmers' increasing overdependence on purchased inputs is driving emissions up and driving margins down. Thus, reducing dependence on purchased inputs can have the double benefit of reducing emissions and increasing incomes. My fourth point, nitrogen fertilizer is a huge environmental problem. Nitrogen fertilizer is unique among all human products and processes in that it is a major source of all 3 of the main greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane. In its manufacture, nitrogen fertilizer is a major source of carbon dioxide. For example, the largest single source of greenhouse gas emissions in Manitoba is the Koch Brothers fertilizer plant in Brandon. In its use in farm fields, nitrogen creates emissions of nitrous oxide, and nitrogen fertilizer produces significant sources of methane from its natural gas feedstock. In Saskatchewan, where I'm from and where I farmed for many years, nitrogen fertilizer tonnage has quadrupled since 1991. There's a wide range of damaging environmental impacts from nitrogen overuse, including ocean dead zones, acidification, and nitrate pollution of groundwater. We must soon decrease our use of nitrogen fertilizer. Again, agriculture does not create environmental problems. Overuse of agricultural inputs creates environmental problems. Thus, low input approaches are key to environmental solutions. My fifth point, please don't support the wrong solutions. Under the guise of fighting climate change, there's a struggle for the control of Canadian farms. We have a climate crisis. As is often the case in a crisis, some are looking for ways to profit. Agribusiness corporations have come forward with technologies they say can reduce emissions. Technologies such as data platforms, artificial intelligence, precision agriculture sensors, drones, bots, driverless tractors, etc. But these technologies threaten to entangle farmers in a vast web of data flows, patents, software licenses, and technology platforms. This web of technology will reduce farmers' control and their margins. But there is an alternative. Measures that focus on soil health, biodiversity, resilience, farm-supplied solutions, and working with nature. As you undertake your study, please remember that there are two competing solutions frameworks. In one, farmers are made ever more dependent on industry. On the other, farmers get more of what we need from biology. My sixth point, please advance justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In thinking about ways to make our farms less environmentally damaging, please also ensure that the programs and policies you advocate benefit all farms of all scales and all production methods. And please look for ways to support small and medium-sized farms, young farmers, new farmers, BIPOC farmers, and the full diversity of Canadians who want to produce food for our tables. Finally, point number 7, we must pursue emission reduction with near wartime levels of intensity, effectiveness, and speed. Climate change is the most serious crisis ever to face humanity. Despite this, we're moving too slowly to counter its intensifying effects. I ask you to proceed as if faced with a massive emergency, because we are. Please be ambitious and courageous. Thank you. The National Farmers Union, the Farmers for Climate Solutions Coalition, and others have prepared plans to reduce agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, increase resilience, and reduce environmental impacts. I look forward to sharing those with your committee as you move forward in developing your report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Qualman. And now, Madame Lagreffière, do we know if Monsieur Lampron is back? So he's...
Monsieur Lampron est pas là en ce moment.
Mr. Lampron is not with us yet. We're sending him new codes so that he can join us. Thank you.
Mr. Wiens, do you want to do the opening statement for the Milk Producers of Canada?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I can get started that. I'll cover off some of the comments that Pierre was going to begin with. I know that you're all very familiar with Pierre Lampron, the president of DFC, and I am the vice president of DFC, and I farm in southern Manitoba. So again, it's good, and it's a good opportunity here to speak on some of the ongoing sustainability efforts of Canadian dairy farmers. And well, of course, we don't want to miss out talking a little bit about, you know, the pleasure of speaking with you on World Milk Day, as you mentioned earlier, a day established by the Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations to recognize the importance of milk as a global food. And this year's theme is sustainability. And that's an area where our sector has made some tremendous strides. And across the nation, farmers are embracing technology to help us create that low carbon future for dairy. And we continue, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We are proud to say that the Canadian dairy sector already has one of the lowest carbon footprints in the world, producing 1 liter of milk in Canada emits less than half the greenhouse gas emissions than the global average, and that's a statistic that comes with great pride to us. In addition, from 1990 to 2016, the carbon footprint of a liter of milk in Canada produced in Canada has decreased by 23%, and that is according to government data. Over the years, dairy farming has made great strides in cutting emissions, land and water required to produce each liter of milk. A life cycle analysis conducted by independent experts show that from 2011 to 2016, the Canadian dairy sector reduced its carbon footprint by 7% and water consumption by 6% and land use by 11%. There are a few sectors in Canada or around the world that can match this kind of progress. In 2019, Dairy Farmers of Canada received international recognition from Unilever in its commitments towards sustainable milk production practices. So our presentation today focuses on how our sector is moving the needle and the role that government can play. So for myself, like many dairy farmers who grew up on multi-generational farms, sustainability is really a part of my DNA. My own farm, my mother started the practice of planting shelter belts some 50 years ago, which greatly reduces soil erosion by wind. I've continued this practice to this day and sought to build on this with other sustainable practices. And if we had time, I could talk about some of those. But our sector continues to make extraordinary progress, and at the heart of it is really our Pro-Action initiative. This is a program that is mandatory for all dairy farms in Canada, and it provides an efficient and coordinated national framework for dairy farmers to demonstrate and document best practices and how to show responsible stewardship of the land and, of course, the animals that are under our care. This fall, our sector will reach another significant milestone on the path to a more sustainable future when the environment module of our Pro-Action initiative is fully implemented. This module's foundational requirement is the Environmental Farm Plan or equivalent. This requirement enables farmers to develop and implement individual action plans, evaluating areas of strengths while addressing areas of opportunity. And of course, that's really important because we are so diverse across the country and across the regions that the Environmental Farm Plan really acknowledges and addresses unique situations on farm. As part of our environment module, farmers are also required to safeguard soil, groundwater, and surface water through responsible management of wastewater and manure. Another key factor in our progress has been our continued investments in research. Canadian dairy farmers allocate more than $2 million annually to dairy nutrition and production research projects. In addition, many farmers work with ruminant animal nutritionists to develop tailored diets for their herds to reduce methane that is emitted naturally through the process of digestion. Among agricultural sectors, dairy farms host the largest number of biodigesters. This technology can both reduce methane emissions from manure storage by up to 60% and also produce renewable energy, which can be used on farm and sold back into the local power grids. The key obstacle preventing the wider use of biodigesters is the associated costs, which can be in the millions. While farmers currently absorb the majority of these costs, government funding for biodigesters, as well as other forms of renewable energy, would certainly be welcomed by our industry. Furthermore, as new feed and additives with the goal of reducing enteric emissions are being developed, funding for research and prompt approval processes to bring them to market will really be of a great benefit to us. Dairy farmers are also working to improve biodiversity. In 2017, a 2017 DFC survey, 55% of producers had increased conservation tillage practices, 11% had decreased summer fallow, and 16% had begun planting perennial crops in the preceding 5 years. Furthermore, in 2020, DFC worked with Ducks Unlimited Canada and researchers at the University of Guelph to better understand biodiversity practices on Canadian dairy farms. On average, farmers surveyed were implementing 5 to 6 practices on their farms, such as cropping, crop rotations, reduced tillage, reduced use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers, and also restoring wetlands. So thanks to these innovations, the industry has become more efficient, making for a smaller environmental footprint for every liter of milk that we produce. Canadian dairy farmers are increasingly adopting new practices in soil health and carbon sequestration, and have been building soil and capturing carbon on their farms for decades. It'll be critical for farmers for our work to be recognized as the Government of Canada seeks to develop a federal greenhouse gas credit system. In the current proposed regulations, carbon offset activities that began on January 1st, 2017 will not be recognized, as they should be considered business as usual. However, best management practices that reduce emissions and sequester carbon involve a deliberate choice by the farmer each year at planting and harvest.
Thank you, Mr. Waynes. If you can conclude quickly.
Okay,
I'll give
sure.
you the time
Thanks.
to conclude because we're past the time.
Okay. As such, practices continue to become an important part of Canada's sustainability strategy, and it will be critical to develop recognized and science-based tools to adequately measure carbon sequestration in the soil. Dairy farmers also participate in a variety of initiatives to help responsibly manage and recycle plastics used on farm. We work with Clean Farms, a nonprofit environmental stewardship organization. DFC is supporting this take-back programs and other local initiatives to help our farmers participate in the circular economy and for agricultural plastics. DFC also supports the further development of these kinds of initiatives in collaboration with government, particularly in more rural and remote areas that do not currently have access.
Mr. Waynes, unfortunately, I have to go to the question round, and you might have that time to give that further information. So, alors avec la première ronde de questions, Monsieur.
So our first round of questions goes to Mr. Liu. You have 6 minutes, Mr. Liu. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much as well to the witnesses for having joined us today. You have mentioned a number of things that were very, very useful, and it went very quickly, but I'd like to take a bit of time to get into some of the issues. Among other things, you mentioned a considerable reduction by 60% of methane emissions. Could you tell us a bit more about this, Mr. Waynes? I understand the government is now setting up offset systems and measures, but credits and so on, but it's not really recognizing the work that's already been undertaken. So tell us a bit more.
Thank you for that question. And certainly what we've seen, what has helped us enable to reduce our methane emissions, certainly a part of it has been to increase our production per cow. So we are today producing considerably more milk with fewer animals than we have in the past. And there's many reasons for that. Partly it's genetics. And of course, we know that Canadian genetics are recognized around the world in terms of the good quality animals that come out of here, but also the way in which we feed our cows. There's so much focus. And what we see is that as farmers, each one of us works with a ruminant nutritionist to develop the kind of diet for the cows that will be very that is very productive, that increases the production per cow, and of course the focus on animal comfort, animal care. The kind of facilities that cows are kept in today are quite luxurious compared to what was seen in the past, and so all of these things have contributed to a reduction in overall methane emissions. And I should say that there's also the focus on particular feeds that actually will create less methane emissions. And I'm not sure, Pierre, if you wanted to add to that. Sorry.
Oui, j'aurais peut-être voir Monsieur Lampron.
Yes, Mr. Lampron, if he has anything to add. But I could also go on with you, Mr. David Vines, about the biodigesters. You said that a lot of work has been done, a lot of investment in these processes, but that the federal government might also play a role. Do you have any agreements with the department?
Monsieur Vien.
Mr. Vines.
So, and Pierre, I will say this, we've had some discussions, but we don't have any, there's no agreements in terms of how we're going to, we're looking at different ways in which we can encourage more biodigesters across the country. And I think it's, there's such, in some areas it's feasible because of the utilities in the province may offer a better return in terms of buying back energy than other provinces. And so that will vary considerably. There's been, I believe there's been some individual projects that have, where there's been some grants made available for producers to make this possible, but not as an across the board, farmers can pursue that. So there's still a lot of barriers that exist for us in terms of moving forward.
Merci, Monsieur Lampron.
Thank you, Mr. Lampron. Do you have anything to add? Yes, indeed. And thank you very much. I'm so sorry for having joined you late. I can see that you're working hard here, even harder than on the farm, perhaps. It's quite clear that the government does want to head in this direction, and this dovetails, I think, with our aims as well. So we'll continue the discussions that have been undertaken. No concrete responses yet or nothing to announce, but I think we're going to be reaching an agreement soon. Mr. Lampron, I'd like to hear you tell us about practices that many farms in Canada are also already using, but I'd like to know a little bit what you're doing, what's being done to improve, basically to better work to protect the environment on a farm. Yes, a great pleasure to let you know what I do. Let's say you take a young person just out of the university working hard on this. Well, some of them were with me recently, and we've planted about 1 million trees, in order to protect the land and to provide food for the birds, fruit plants for the birds, fruit trees. And we encourage other farms to adopt exactly these practices. We have many people come visit us, many environmental groups, and we are members of many of these groups, which help us develop better practices in support of the best environmental situation possible. On a day-to-day basis, it's really what we're doing. That's what farmers do. They try to do their best. We want to be part of the solution. Yes, indeed. Aren't you part of the solution? And is this being sufficiently recognized? What you've been doing over the past 10, 20 years, a lot of important work has been done to protect the environment. Well, I think maybe we should blame ourselves. Perhaps we didn't really speak up enough to say all the good things we were doing, and we'll try to do better on that now. I can see that many of you here are also working on this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Lampron, Mr. Leroux, and welcome, Mr. Lampron. I know you had a bit of technical difficulty joining you, but we're so glad to see you now.
For 6 minutes, go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank all the panelists. And you know what? It's only fitting, like on World Milk Day, that I start with the dairy farmers. So I appreciate that you being here today on this day, on this World Milk Day. You said recognizing milk as a global food. So I appreciate that. And I also appreciate some of the examples that you said to lower your carbon footprint. And I was specifically interested in if you could expand on through the feed that they're talking about. You're saying that particular feeds that can actually create less methane emissions. Can you expand a bit more on that? I would leave it to either of you. I'm not sure. I know Mr. Ween's longer.
Thank you. Yeah, I could certainly start on that. And so, yeah, a big part of this is, for example, one of the things they're finding too is, as part of having a high quality forages, particularly, and corn silage, for example, is also a feed that helps to reduce it, and also just by increasing the production. Also our quotas are based on butterfat, for example. So, we do feed the cows in such a way that that we can get the right balance between butterfat and protein, and so that it takes actually less milk to fill our quotas. But there's some really interesting things that are happening out there, and there's something it's really more in the development stages. But there's things like certain kind of seaweed, for example, that is known to considerably reduce methane emissions in cattle. And I think those are the opportunities. And it's not like, I mean, obviously we don't all live by the sea, so we don't have access to it, but certainly we do feed additives, right? So we'll feed things, we have the basic diets, but what really boosts our production are things like wheat distillers, grain distillers, canola meal, and all these good things which create more efficiency. And also, I think we have to, through research, I think it's really important to continue to look for those, those various kind of plants and feed additives that will help us to further reduce our methane emissions. And I think we've just really, in a sense, we've begun that. I think there's a lot more potential out there.
Well, I appreciate that. And you mentioned biodigesters, and I know that I've got a biodigester company here in my riding in Kitchener-Conestoga in BioN. And you mentioned that right now the associated costs are higher, but you'll be happy to know that we were talking to department officials just in the last hour, and they're looking up ways to setting up a system of offset credits, and they specifically mentioned biomass and biodigesters. So are there other practices that you might be more incentivized to do if you could receive offset credits like that?
Well, I think I mean, we see some things like, for example, the solar panels, I think is another area in which, we see that, some farms have installed them, and the farms are almost, completely, can actually operate off of the panels. And then at times they can put energy back into the grid, which, and I think, those are all huge investments on the farm, and the payback is it's probably close to 15 years, so it's a significant investment. So I think something like that is one area in which I think would be well received by farmers, and of course some potential on scaled wind turbines and so on, like to kind of to farm size. And anyway, and I think maybe Pierre would have some further comments on that. I think there's some things happening too there.
Oui, merci David. Je vais aussi vous parler un peu pour le...
Thank you, David. I would also like to tell you a bit more about crops and grains and feed. Really, it's about calculating the rations. It's really taking the right amount, the right thing, so that there is no loss. And research is helpful for that. As to the credits, farms are worked from generation to generation. People have been capturing and sequestering carbon naturally. Everything that was done between 77 or 2017 shouldn't be calculated. I don't know. I mean, sometimes things have been set up over generations.
Much time as I'd like, but I would like to talk to Mr. Qualman, and I appreciate the reports, both Tackling Farm Crisis and Imagine If. Really enjoyed that, and it was great. So we talked about, very briefly, low input, low emission. We talk a lot of tech solutions, but I love that your reports have they're very how to say it, agroecology oriented. So can you tell us about enhanced soil health and what kind of things we can do to lower that nitrogen in the very short time I have? And then maybe we'll set up a meeting after, because I'd love to talk more.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, we really believe that key to reducing input use, increasing resilience, water infiltration, drought resistance, and maintaining yield and farm productivity and profitability as we move into a future where we have to use fewer inputs. Key to that is soil health. As you may know, soil with a lot of organic matter and carbon, it absorbs more water, holds it, and is really a key thing as we move into a future where rainfall will be less predictable, more intense, more drought, but also more flood. So really, we think that the way to make our farms more resilient and maintain their output and profitability moving forward is to really focus on the health of that soil, because that's key to our output.
Thank you, Mr. Qualman. Merci, Monsieur Lewis. And maintenant, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. And now, Mr. Perron. You have 6 minutes, sir. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for assisting us here today. And indeed, this is a wonderful World Milk Day to hear you on. Perhaps we should find a way to recognize what has been done in the past, the work carried out in the past, as some of you have said. Obviously, the environment specialists in the prior group of witnesses said that this seemed to be a challenge for them, and it didn't seem to be something they had really set out to do. Do you think there is a way to measure an average of greenhouse gas emissions by farm and then start from there? Of course, we won't be able to recognize everything, but do you have any solutions to suggest to the government and to the civil servants in this regard? Especially recognize farms that are in part covered by forests. Are they carbon sinks in that way? Are there any other carbon sink capacities, such as fallow areas or ground coverings? Number of things that can be recognized. So establish some sort of calculation. It might be complex. It might be controversial. Do you have any groups working on this? Well, I'm not sure it really would be all that complex. From what I understand, from what I see done, people aren't necessarily going to see what is actually taking place so far in agriculture, but that's what counts, without, going back, too far behind, but perhaps recognize a certain period of time over which people set in new systems and were pioneers in doing so. How about you, for example? How about on your farm? Well, this is what motivates producers, of course. The fact that their work will be recognized. I mean, this is what they've put their labor in for, their lives in for, and it would be nice to have it recognized. I agree. Do you think there would be any way to lay out a starting point, a unit of measure, and then measure each farm against it? A credit for some, a debt for others, so that you could get some sort of offset credit market.
Cycle analysis that's being done already, and that is available for individual farms to work out what that life cycle analysis looks like on their farm. So I would certainly think that that's an area which which would help us to identify where the individual farms are at.
Okay. Monsieur Qualman, là-dessus?
Mr. Qualman, any comment on that? I'd like to hear what you have to say to this idea.
Just in terms of paying farmers for their past work and their ongoing work, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very, very good thing. That should be done. But doing it within the offset credit system is really disastrous, because when you credit someone for doing something they've already done or would have done anyway, at the very same time, you're giving a large emitter a license to continue emitting in excess. So there's nothing wrong with the idea that farmers should be recognized, but it shouldn't be done within the offset credit system.
Comment on pourrait faire à ce moment-là pour le...
So how should it be done? Earlier, You mentioned recognizing the quality of the soil, and others who are specialists in organic farming told us about a microbiological way of telling what type of soil you're dealing with. Is there some way of setting a benchmark?
Not within the offset credit system. There's just so many problems with that. For instance, if you credit farmers with putting carbon into the soils within the offset credit system, the regulations as they're written call for 100 years of monitoring and reporting, potentially 100 years of liability, possibly unlimited liability, and possibly 100 years of locking farmers into farming in a certain way. So all of these things need to be incentivized, cost sharing, incentive payments. We need a large suite of agro-environmental incentives, but the offset credit system is not the right way to get this done.
All right, if we go to your approach about entry-level elements, what's used on the farm, perhaps use some sort of standard there and encourage people to reduce their use of them.
In terms of reducing inputs, key is giving people alternatives. That's why it's so important not just to ask people to use less of something, but show them how to use crop rotations, biological soil nitrogen fixation, intercropping, cover crops, and a whole suite of enhanced management techniques so that they can maintain the same output, but while using fewer and fewer inputs. And that's where these agro-environmental programs could help do the research, demonstrate, and then incentivize and make these practices common in the countryside.
Yes, well, thank you, Mr. Lampron. If I go back to you, this is what you've done, reduce inputs by increasing the quality of your feedstock, for example, adding seaweeds and so on and so forth. Could you tell us a bit about that? Mr. Lampron, very quickly, please. I'd like to go back to what David has said. A life cycle analysis involves many factors, international standards and so on. There's certainly room for improvement, but these things are improving. Well, you know, the inputs, the outputs, you get a pretty good view of that if you want quickly, and that might be one way of going about it. Thank you, Mr. Lampron. Thank you, Mr. Perron.
For 6 minutes, go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. I'll wish the dairy farmers of Canada a happy World Milk Day. It seems appropriate to do that right off the bat. But Mr. Qualman, I'd like to start with you. I thought it was quite illuminating that you made the comment that agriculture is not the problem. It's our inputs, and that struck me. We have had previous testimony in May from Danone, which has invested some of its own money in helping farmers change their practices into regenerative agricultural methods. They have reported that those farmers have enjoyed the benefits of better soil health. They have enjoyed the benefits of lower input costs, and they have enjoyed the benefits of higher yields. So there seems to be a holy trinity right there. I mean, it seems, you know, from your perspective, and I've read a lot of the literature from the NFU, is what is needed is a paradigm shift. So, you know, when this committee is going to be writing its report and making its recommendations to the federal government, I guess if you could just expand on some of the ways that, you know, the federal government can best serve in helping with that paradigm shift, because I know farmers, they already have a lot of base knowledge, and they are quite independent, and you know, we don't want an Ottawa knows best approach, but we do want to identify those particular methods that are out there that are working in those three specific areas, and just, yeah, if you can expand on that concept, I think that would be quite helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, we do need a paradigm shift. We need a real transformation in agriculture and in just about every sector to make it less dependent on fossil fuels and lower emission. Agroecology is a key part of that. a focus on working with nature, getting more of what we need from biology and less from industry, fewer petro-industrial inputs, and more of what we need from biodiversity, soil organisms, etc. Some of the ways that government can support that and really taking an ambitious run at this idea of transformation, we've proposed a new agency called the Canadian Farm Resilience Agency, CFRA. It's patterned on the PFRA. The last time we had a massive environmental disaster in agriculture was the 1930s and the Dust Bowl. Coming out of that, the government created the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Administration to work with farmers to really change how things were done, to work on water supply, tillage, everything around the farm, putting in trees, etc. We think that was a very good model. Here we are in the 21st century, we've got another climate crisis. We think that a CFRA could provide free soil testing, independent extension agrologists, and that's agrologists who aren't focused on just selling more inputs, but instead helping farmers transition to a low input, low emission model. They could run demonstration farms where low input, low emission practices were refined and showcased, etc. So that's an example. The CFRA is an example of how government could lead that kind of transformation and how it could engage in what we talk about in terms of near wartime levels of work and effort on this front.
Yeah, and one where farmers are those active participants and very much co-drivers in driving this kind of change. You also took some time to make comments about the major problems associated with use of nitrogen fertilizer. And, we certainly are acquainted with Fertilizer Canada. They have been a regular witness before our committee, and much has been made about the 4R program that they have. And I would agree with them that it has had significant effects or improvements. I guess, what I'm concerned with is, is there too much industry-led research out there vis-a-vis public research into this area? Because I guess when one of the struggles you have when trying to explain this paradigm shift is that farmers might be comfortable with the way things are being done now. They know how to apply their fertilizer. They know approximately the yields that they will get. I guess what are some of the struggles we have in trying to show them that alternative methods, in fact, can have these improvements?
Yeah, the 4R efficiency measures are important. They do a lot, but efficiency alone won't get us to where we need to go. The federal government very wisely put in a target of a 30% reduction in nitrogen-related emissions by 2030. Efficiency will get us part of the way, but really reducing absolute tonnage is going to be needed in order to meet that target. And tonnage is going the other way. I mentioned in Saskatchewan, we've quadrupled fertilizer use in just 3 decades. In Canada, it's doubled over about the same period of time. Those trend lines are going in the wrong direction. So we need 4R, but we need much, much more. And again, that's where things like these independent extension agrologists actually coming to the farm and standing in the field with the farmer and taking a whole farm, whole system look, not just at how much fertilizer is going on to a field of canola, but how that canola works within a larger cropping system of rotations and cover crops and soil health plans and all of that. So
thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, we're out of time. And now the second round, Mr. Steinley, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Steinley.
Thank you very much, and appreciate the witnesses for being here today. My first question is for Mr. Coleman, and we've had Mr. Perry come in from Agri-Food Canada and say agricultural emissions have remained steady from about 2005. Would you agree with that statement?
I would, but I would add to that emissions are up by about 23% since 1990.
Okay. but since 2005, they remain steady. And I agree with you. There are a lot of practices. I'm from Saskatchewan. I grew up on a dairy and beef farm in Swift Current, around Swift Current, Saskatchewan. So I know we've been doing cover crops and tree rows and crop rotation and rotational grazing for years now as good practices to help conserve our soil. And you did make a mention about the 100-year carbon, I guess, journey that is supposed to be part of the offset program. I guess, could you imagine locking in farm practices from 1921 until 2021 and what that would do? So I'd say, would you have any comments around the carbon offset framework and how just trying to lock farmers into certain practices is just not the right path to go down to with this particular policy?
I completely agree. And briefly, the liability problem is huge because a farmer could sell a bunch of offsets now. The price might be pretty low at, say, $10 a ton. But that carbon might, for some reason, get released decades from now, and the price might be $50 or $100 a ton. So they might end up having to pay back many, many times more than they received. So there's a long-term unlimited liability problem.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm going to switch directions and for the dairy farmers of Canada, and thank you for being here today, and happy World Milk Day. I'm a big proponent of milk and always have been. One thing that I've asked and talked about during the carbon offset framework is the idea of not having any, basically from 2018 prior, you're not going to get credit for your good environmental practices. And we talked about biodigesters, which are different than biomass. So biodigesters were put in place so that you could, for manure handling. Could you guys go on kind of an idea of why you should be given credit for those biodigesters and the amount of money it costs to put those on your farms?
So I would begin by saying that the biodigesters, like I said earlier, a project like that is into the millions, and it is really biodigesters is more involved than simply putting the manure into it and away you go. I mean, they have to be, to me, it's been likened to feeding a biodigester is like feeding a cow. You have to be very specific. I mean, they require certain rations to work successfully, and so that's where it is for a farm. There is risk in doing that, and we know what the benefits are. But first of all, it's a huge financial investment, and you sure hope that everything goes right with the digester. But maybe you want to clarify your part of your question there.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a huge upfront investment. And what I'm saying is just how unfair the idea of this government putting forward that business as usual practices that have been done up to 2018 aren't going to get the environmental credit they deserve. And I think that's a big pushback. We've heard from soil conservation groups in Saskatchewan that you should be given credit for the good practices that you have done in this carbon offset framework. And the Minister of Environment and Minister of Agriculture have, for some reason, picked this 2018 deadline of business per usual. And I think just an example of how much money dairy producers have put up front for some of the better technology to lower their carbon footprint, and the credit they should get for that is the kind of the gist of my argument there.
Yeah, and certainly that is a challenge when when there's improvements made in best management practices and investments on farm, and it's not acknowledged, because in a sense then some may actually be waiting until this thing happens rather. It's important to reward early adopters.
Just one quick question. I hope you put forward a submission saying that we should move that date of 2018 and really look as a committee at the business as usual practices. And I hope you can put forward a submission to make sure that is looked at as a committee going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. And unfortunately today we have a hard stop 5:30. So we're going to have to cut it off here. I see that people would have another hour of questions for these witnesses. I really want to thank le producteur laitier du Canada, M. Lampron, merci de nous joindre, and Mr. Wien.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Lampron.
Being here with us, de l'Union Nationale des Familles, Mr. Qualman, very interesting way of looking at it. So perhaps we can invite all of you a second time. Alors, merci tout le monde. Thanks, everyone. And we shall see you all on Thursday. Thank you, everyone. Merci.
Thank you.